The morning sun barely touched the tall windows of Willowmere Palace when Martha Bellwether pushed through the heavy wooden doors of the royal kitchen. Steam already rose from the massive copper pots, and the familiar sounds of chopping, stirring, and gentle sizzling filled the air. At 62, Martha had been head cook for nearly 30 years, and she knew every corner of this kitchen like the back of her weathered hands. "Morning, Mrs. Bellwether," called out Tommy, the youngest kitchen assistant. He was only 17, with wild red hair that refused to stay under his cap and freckles scattered across his nose like cinnamon on porridge. Tommy had joined the palace staff just 6 months ago, but his enthusiasm made up for his lack of experience. Martha smiled warmly. "Good morning, lad. Have you started the morning bread yet?" "Yes, ma'am. 3 loaves are already rising, and I got the dough ready for the dinner rolls." Tommy beamed with pride. Baking had become his specialty, and he took great care with every batch. The kitchen doors swung open again, and in walked Rosalind Shunn, the palace's newest addition to the culinary team. She had arrived just 2 weeks ago from the prestigious Cordon Bleu cooking school in France. At 28, she was full of modern ideas and fancy techniques that sometimes clashed with the traditional methods the palace kitchen had used for generations. "Good morning, everyone," Rosalind said, tying her crisp, white apron around her waist. Her knife roll was perfectly organized, each blade gleaming and sharp enough to slice paper. "I was thinking we could try something different for today's lunch. Perhaps a deconstructed shepherd's pie with molecular gastronomy elements." Martha raised an eyebrow. She had heard these strange cooking terms before, but wasn't quite sure what they meant. "Deconstructed? You mean taken apart?" "Exactly. Instead of the traditional casserole, we present each element separately, but artistically arranged. The meat becomes a perfect sphere using sodium alginate. The potatoes transform into an airy foam, and the vegetables turn into colorful pearls that burst with flavor." Tommy looked confused. "But won't that just make more work? And what if people want regular shepherd's pie?" Before Rosalind could answer, the kitchen doors burst open with such force that everyone jumped. In stumbled Edgar Pumpernickel, but everyone called him Spudman. He was the palace's potato specialist, a job that sounded simple, but was actually quite important. Edgar knew everything there was to know about potatoes, which varieties were best for mashing, which ones made the crispiest chips, and how to store them so they stayed perfect for months. Edgar was a round, jolly man in his 50s with a gray beard that he kept neatly trimmed. His hands were permanently stained with soil, and he always smelled faintly of earth and growing things. What made him unusual wasn't just his expertise with potatoes, but the fact that he talked to them. Not just casual conversation, but full discussions about the weather, palace gossip, and his theories about cooking. "Martha! Martha!" Edgar called out, slightly out of breath. "You'll never believe what happened in the potato cellar this morning." Martha wiped her hands on her apron. "What's wrong, Edgar? Did we lose a shipment?" "Not lost, but something wonderful. I was checking on the King Edwards when I heard this soft humming coming from the Yukon Golds. I thought maybe it was the ventilation system, but when I got closer, I swear the potatoes were humming a tune." Rosalind looked skeptical. "Potatoes don't hum, Mr. Pumpernickel. Perhaps it was just the air circulation creating some sort of acoustic phenomenon." Edgar shook his head vigorously. "No, no, no. These potatoes were definitely humming. And not just any tune, it was God Save the King. I've been working with potatoes for 40 years, and I know when they're happy. These potatoes are trying to tell us something special is coming." Tommy's eyes went wide. He had grown up in a small village where people believed in all sorts of magical things. So singing potatoes didn't seem impossible to him. "What do you think they're trying to say?" "I think they want to be part of something important," Edgar said seriously. "Maybe they know about the royal visit next week. The King of Brightdale is coming, and his daughter Princess Melody will be with him. The potatoes might want to help make the perfect meal." Martha had heard about the royal visit, of course. It was all anyone had talked about for weeks. The King of Brightdale was Willowmere's closest ally, and his visit would include a grand feast that needed to impress. The palace's reputation depended on serving an unforgettable meal. Speaking of the royal feast, Martha said, "We need to start planning the menu seriously. Mrs. Thornberry from the planning committee will be here this afternoon to discuss what the guests expect." Rosalind's face lit up with excitement. "This is perfect. We can use molecular gastronomy to create something they've never experienced before. Imagine caviar made from fruit juices or bread that changes color as you eat it." Martha looked uncertain. Royal guests were often quite traditional in their tastes, and she worried about serving them something too unusual. "I don't know, dear. What if they don't like experimental food? But this is our chance to show how innovative Willowmere Palace can be," Rosalind insisted. "We could become famous throughout the kingdom for our culinary artistry." Edgar nodded enthusiastically. "The potatoes agree with Rosalind. I can feel their excitement. They want to be part of something amazing." Tommy looked back and forth between the older, traditional approach Martha represented and the exciting new ideas Rosalind brought. "Maybe we could do both? Keep some traditional dishes, but also try some new things?" Before anyone could respond, the kitchen doors opened once more, and in walked Mrs. Cordelia Thornberry, the palace's head of event planning. She was a thin, elegant woman in her 50s who always dressed impeccably and never seemed to have a hair out of place. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who had organized hundreds of royal events without a single mistake. "Good morning, kitchen staff," Mrs. Thornberry said in her crisp, professional voice. "I hope you're prepared for our menu discussion because this feast must be absolutely perfect. The King of Brightdale has very specific expectations." Martha straightened her shoulders. "Of course, Mrs. Thornberry. We're ready to hear what you need." Mrs. Thornberry pulled out a leather notebook and opened it to a page covered with neat handwriting. "The king expects traditional dishes prepared to the highest standard. His daughter, Princess Melody, is known to be quite particular about her food. She doesn't like anything too spicy, too sweet, or too unusual. Simple, elegant, and perfectly executed. That's what we need." Rosalind's face fell slightly, but she didn't give up. "Surely there's room for some creative presentation? Even traditional dishes can be served in new and exciting ways." Mrs. Thornberry looked at Rosalind over her reading glasses. "Miss Chun, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but royal guests prefer familiarity over surprise when it comes to food. They want to enjoy their meal without worrying about what they're eating." Edgar stepped forward, his eyes bright with an idea. "What if we made the most perfect traditional dishes anyone has ever tasted? The potatoes are telling me they can help us achieve something special, not by changing what we make, but by making it better than ever before." Mrs. Thornberry looked intrigued despite herself. "What do you mean?" "I mean using the absolute best ingredients prepared with love and care. My potatoes are at their peak right now. Martha's cooking skills are legendary. Tommy's bread is getting better every day. And Rosalind's technical knowledge could help us perfect our traditional techniques." Martha nodded slowly. Edgar might be onto something. What if we focused on making classic dishes, but executed them flawlessly? The best roast beef anyone has ever tasted, vegetables cooked to absolute perfection, potatoes that are so creamy and flavorful that guests will remember them for years. Tommy raised his hand shyly. "I've been practicing a traditional bread recipe my grandmother taught me. It's simple, but it takes 3 days to make because you have to let the flavors develop slowly. If I start now, it will be ready just in time for the feast." Mrs. Thornberry made notes in her book. "That sounds more appropriate. Traditional excellence rather than modern experimentation." Rosalind looked disappointed, but then had another thought. "What if I use my technical knowledge to perfect the traditional techniques? I know precisely how to control temperature and timing to achieve the best results. I can help make sure nothing goes wrong." "Now that sounds like a plan," Mrs. Thornberry said approvingly. "Traditional dishes prepared with modern precision. The best of both worlds." Edgar clapped his hands together. "Excellent. I'll go talk to the potatoes right now and let them know they'll be part of something wonderful. They'll be so excited." As Edgar hurried off toward the potato cellar, Martha began thinking about the enormous task ahead of them. Feeding royal guests wasn't just about cooking. It was about creating an experience that would strengthen the friendship between two kingdoms. Every dish had to be perfect, every flavor had to sing, and every plate had to tell the story of Willomir's hospitality and skill. "How many guests will we be serving?" Martha asked Mrs. Thornberry. 45 people for the main feast, plus staff and security. So we should prepare for at least 60 meals to be safe. Rosalind quickly calculated in her head. That's quite a large number for such an important meal. We'll need to plan very carefully to ensure consistency across all plates. Tommy looked nervous. "I've never helped cook for so many important people before. What if I mess something up?" Martha put a reassuring hand on Tommy's shoulder. "You won't mess anything up, lad. We'll work as a team, and everyone will contribute their best skills. That's how we've always done things in this kitchen." Mrs. Thornberry closed her notebook. "I'll leave you to plan the specific menu, but remember, we have exactly 1 week to prepare. The king and princess arrive next Friday, and the feast is scheduled for Saturday evening. There's no room for error." After Mrs. Thornberry left, the kitchen fell quiet except for the usual sounds of cooking. Martha looked around at her team. Young Tommy with his enthusiasm and growing skills, sophisticated Rosalind with her advanced training and modern ideas, and Edgar, who would soon return with his deep knowledge of ingredients and his mysterious connection to the potatoes. Right then, Martha said finally, "We have a week to create the most memorable feast this palace has ever served. It won't be easy, but I believe we can do it. Tommy, I want you to start that special bread today. Rosalind, let's talk about how your techniques can improve our traditional recipes. And when Edgar gets back, we'll plan how to showcase his amazing potatoes." Rosalind smiled, her earlier disappointment forgotten. "I have some ideas about how to achieve the perfect texture for different preparations. For instance, did you know that cooking potatoes at exactly 140 degrees Fahrenheit for several hours can create an incredibly creamy texture while maintaining their shape?" Tommy's eyes widened. "Really? How is that possible?" "It's all about controlling the breakdown of starches," Rosalind explained. "Modern cooking science can help us achieve results that traditional methods sometimes miss." Martha nodded approvingly. "See, this is exactly what we need, combining your knowledge with our experience. Edgar always says the potatoes know when they're being treated right. Maybe your scientific approach will make them even happier." The conversation was interrupted by Edgar's return from the potato cellar. His face was glowing with excitement, and he was practically bouncing on his feet. "Martha, everyone, you have to come see this. The potatoes aren't just humming anymore. They're practically singing an entire opera. I've never seen anything like it in all my years of potato work." Rosalind looked skeptical again, but Martha and Tommy were curious enough to follow Edgar toward the cellar. The potato storage area was located beneath the main kitchen, down a set of stone steps that had been worn smooth by centuries of feet. The cellar was cool and dark, with wooden shelves lining the walls. Each shelf held carefully sorted potatoes of different varieties, from tiny fingerlings to massive baking potatoes. As they descended the steps, Martha had to admit she could hear something unusual. There was a soft, rhythmic sound that might have been ventilation, but seemed almost musical. When they reached the bottom of the stairs, Edgar led them to a particular shelf where the Yukon Gold potatoes were stored. "Listen carefully," Edgar whispered. In the quiet of the cellar, the sound was more distinct. It was definitely rhythmic, almost like a gentle humming. Tommy gasped softly, and even Rosalind looked puzzled. "That is quite unusual," Rosalind admitted. "There could be a scientific explanation. Perhaps changes in humidity or temperature are causing the potatoes to release gases in a rhythmic pattern." Edgar shook his head. "It's not gas, it's happiness. These potatoes know they're about to be part of something special. They're trying to tell us they're ready." Martha reached out and picked up one of the humming potatoes. It felt perfect in her hands, firm but not hard, with smooth skin that promised creamy flesh inside. "Well, scientific explanation or not, these are certainly beautiful potatoes. Edgar, you've done excellent work with them." "Thank you, Martha. I've been talking to them every day, telling them about the royal feast, and how important it is. I think they understand. As they climbed back up to the kitchen, Martha's mind was already working on menu possibilities. With potatoes this perfect, she could create several different dishes that would showcase their quality. Creamy mashed potatoes with herbs from the palace garden, crispy roasted potatoes with rosemary and sea salt, perhaps even a traditional potato soup that could serve as an elegant starter. Back in the main kitchen, Rosalind had pulled out her notebook and was sketching ideas for combining traditional techniques with modern precision. Tommy was already measuring flour for his grandmother's bread recipe, his young face serious with concentration. "Right," Martha said, taking charge. "Let's plan our menu properly. We need dishes that will impress without being too unusual. Edgar, what varieties of potatoes do we have available?" Edgar's face lit up as he began listing the different types. "We have Yukon Golds, perfect for mashing. King Edwards for the best roasting. Some lovely fingerlings that would be beautiful, simply steamed with butter. And I've got some Purple Majesties that would add a touch of color without being too strange." "Perfect," Martha said. "Rosalind, how would you suggest we prepare each variety to achieve the best results?" Rosalind consulted her notes. "For the mashed potatoes, we should cook them at a consistent temperature and pass them through a fine sieve to ensure perfect smoothness. The roasted potatoes should be parboiled first, then roasted at a high temperature to create a crispy exterior and fluffy interior. The fingerlings could be cooked sous vide to maintain their shape while ensuring even cooking throughout." Tommy looked up from his bread preparation. "What about something simple for people who don't want anything fancy? My gran always said that sometimes the simplest things are the best." Martha smiled. "Your grandmother was a wise woman, Tommy. We'll include some perfectly boiled new potatoes with fresh herbs and butter. Sometimes simple is exactly what people want." As the morning progressed, the kitchen began to transform into a planning headquarters for the royal feast. Lists appeared on walls, recipes were discussed and refined, and everyone contributed ideas. The atmosphere was excited but focused. They all understood the importance of their task. Edgar made several more trips to the potato cellar, each time returning with reports of increasingly happy vegetables. Whether or not the potatoes were actually making music, his enthusiasm was infectious. Even Rosalind began to see the value in his passionate approach to ingredients. "You know," Rosalind said thoughtfully, "there's actually scientific support for the idea that produce tastes better when it's been cared for with attention and respect. The stress levels of plants do affect their cellular structure and flavor compounds." Edgar nodded vigorously. "Exactly. The potatoes know when someone cares about them. That's why they're singing. They're happy because they know they'll be appreciated." Tommy paused in his bread kneading. "Do you think the bread knows I care about it too?" Martha laughed gently. "I think all our ingredients respond to being treated with care and respect. That's part of what makes cooking an art as well as a science." As the day continued, word of the singing potatoes began to spread throughout the palace. Kitchen assistants found excuses to visit the cellar, and even some of the household staff stopped by to listen. Whether they believed the potatoes were actually making music or not, everyone agreed that Edgar had produced exceptional vegetables. By afternoon, the basic menu was taking shape. They would serve a traditional roast beef as the main course, accompanied by Edgar's perfect potatoes prepared in several different ways. Tommy's special bread would accompany a starter of seasonal soup. Vegetables from the palace garden would provide color and freshness. And for dessert, they planned a selection of traditional British puddings that would be familiar but expertly prepared. "It's a good menu," Mrs. Thornberry said when she returned to review their plans. "Traditional, elegant, and showcasing the best of what our kitchen can produce. The King of Brightdale will appreciate this approach." But as the day ended and the kitchen staff prepared to go home, Martha felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. They had just 1 week to execute this menu flawlessly for some of the most important guests the palace had ever received. Everything had to be perfect, not just good, but absolutely perfect. "Are we ready for this?" Tommy asked quietly as he cleaned his workstation. Martha looked around at her team, Edgar carefully checking his potatoes one last time, Rosalind organizing her notes, and recipes, and Tommy himself, eager and hardworking despite his youth. "Yes," she said with more confidence than she felt. "We're ready. We have excellent ingredients, skilled hands, and a week to prepare. Most importantly, we have each other. This kitchen has never failed when we've worked together." As they locked up the kitchen for the night, Edgar made one final prediction. "The potatoes are telling me this feast will be remembered for generations." They're very excited about Saturday. Whether the potatoes were truly prophetic or Edgar was just optimistic, Martha hoped he was right. In 6 days, they would find out if their combination of traditional cooking and modern precision could create something truly special for the royal guests. The Royal Kitchen Chronicles had begun, and the most important chapter was still to come. Hashtag the Royal Kitchen Chronicles. Tuesday morning arrived with gray clouds hanging over Willowmere Palace. But inside the royal kitchen, the atmosphere was bright with determination. Martha arrived earlier than usual to find Edgar already there, sitting at the large wooden prep table with a cup of tea and a notebook filled with his careful handwriting. "Morning, Edgar," Martha said, surprised. "You're here early." Edgar looked up with excitement dancing in his eyes. "I couldn't sleep, Martha. The potatoes kept me awake with their singing. They've been practicing all night. Listen to this. I've been writing down the different songs they're humming for each dish we're planning." Martha poured herself tea from the large pot Edgar had prepared and sat down beside him. His notebook was filled with what looked like song titles written in his neat script: "The Mashed Potato Waltz," "Roasted Potato March," and "The Fingerling Lullaby." "Edgar," Martha said gently, "you know the potatoes aren't really singing, don't you? It's probably just the air circulation system making those sounds." Edgar shook his head firmly. "Martha, I've been working with vegetables for 40 years. I know the difference between machinery and magic. These potatoes are special, and they want to help us create something wonderful for the royal feast." Before Martha could respond, the kitchen door swung open and Tommy bounded in, his red hair even wilder than usual from the morning wind. He was carrying a canvas bag that smelled wonderfully of fresh herbs. "Good morning," Tommy called out cheerfully. "I stopped by the palace garden on my way in and picked fresh rosemary, thyme, and sage. The gardeners said they're at their peak right now." Martha smiled at Tommy's enthusiasm. Despite his youth, he was proving to be one of the most dedicated kitchen staff she'd ever worked with. "That's excellent thinking, lad. Fresh herbs will make all the difference in our dishes." Rosalind arrived a few minutes later, looking somewhat frazzled. She was carrying several large books under one arm and a box of what appeared to be scientific equipment under the other. "Sorry I'm late," she said, slightly out of breath. "I was up most of the night researching traditional British cooking methods. I want to understand the science behind why these recipes have worked for so long." She set her books on the counter and opened the top one, revealing pages covered with diagrams and temperature charts. "Did you know that the perfect temperature for roasting beef is actually much lower than most people think? If we cook it at exactly 130 degrees Fahrenheit after an initial searing, we can achieve perfect doneness throughout while maintaining maximum tenderness." Edgar nodded approvingly. "The potatoes told me you were studying last night. They could sense your dedication through the kitchen walls." Rosalind paused, looking slightly confused. "The potatoes told you I was studying?" "Oh, yes," Edgar said seriously. "They're very aware of everything that happens in their kitchen. They like you, by the way. They appreciate that you're trying to learn traditional methods instead of just changing everything." Martha decided to redirect the conversation before Edgar could elaborate further on his potato communications. "Right then, let's focus on what we need to accomplish today. We have 5 days until the feast, and there's a lot of preparation work that needs to be done." Tommy raised his hand like a school child. "I started the special bread yesterday, and it's developing beautifully. The starter is bubbling away in the pantry, and it smells like my grandmother's kitchen used to smell." "Excellent," Martha said. "What else needs to be started early?" Rosalind consulted her notebook. "If we're going to prepare the beef using low-temperature cooking methods, we should start the initial preparations 2 days before serving. That means Thursday morning. We'll need to source the best possible cut of beef and allow it to come to room temperature gradually. Edgar stood up excitedly. I know exactly where to get the best beef. There's a farm about 10 miles from here where the farmer talks to his cattle, just like I talk to my potatoes. His beef is extraordinary because the animals are happy and well cared for. Martha raised an eyebrow. Edgar, we can't just change suppliers at the last minute. The palace has contracts with specific farms and butchers. But Martha, Edgar insisted, happy animals make better food, just like happy vegetables do. If we're going to create something truly special, we need ingredients that have been raised with love and care. Rosalind looked thoughtful. Actually, there's scientific evidence supporting that theory. Animals that experience less stress produce more tender meat with better flavor compounds. The farmer Edgar mentions might genuinely produce superior beef. Tommy looked excited by the prospect of an adventure. Could we go visit this farm? I've never seen how beef cattle are raised. And if it might make our feast better. Martha felt torn between following proper palace procedures and pursuing the best possible ingredients for their important meal. As head cook, she was responsible for maintaining relationships with approved suppliers, but she also wanted to serve the most exceptional feast possible. Let me think about this, Martha said finally. Perhaps we could at least go look at what this farmer has available. If his beef is truly superior, maybe we could arrange something. Edgar clapped his hands together. Wonderful. The potatoes will be so excited. They've been hoping we'd seek out the best possible companions for the meal. The morning flew by as the team continued planning and preparing. Tommy worked on perfecting his bread technique, carefully monitoring the fermentation process and adjusting the dough based on how it felt and smelled. His grandmother had taught him that bread was as much about intuition as it was about following recipes. Rosalind spent time calculating precise cooking times and temperatures for each dish, creating detailed charts that would ensure perfect results. Her scientific approach fascinated Tommy, who asked dozens of questions about why different techniques worked the way they did. Edgar made frequent trips to the potato cellar, returning each time with updates on the vegetable's mood and preferences. Whether or not anyone else believed in his ability to communicate with produce, his passion for quality ingredients was undeniable. Around midday, Mrs. Thornberry arrived with news that changed everything. I've just received word from the king of Brightdale's advance party, she announced, looking slightly worried. Princess Melody has some dietary restrictions we weren't informed about earlier. She's apparently quite sensitive to certain seasonings and prefers very simple preparations. Martha felt her stomach tighten. What kind of restrictions are we talking about? No garlic, no onions, no heavy spices of any kind. She also prefers vegetables that are barely cooked, almost raw, really. And she has a particular fondness for potatoes, but only if they're prepared in very specific ways. Edgar perked up immediately. What specific ways? Mrs. Thornberry consulted her notes. According to her personal assistant, Princess Melody believes that potatoes should be cooked with respect and understanding. She can apparently taste whether vegetables have been treated well during their preparation. Edgar nearly jumped out of his chair. You see, I told you the potatoes were special. Princess Melody understands what I've been saying all along. Vegetables know when they're being respected. Rosalind looked skeptical, but intrigued. There might be some truth to that from a scientific perspective. Stress compounds in vegetables can affect their flavor. If Edgar's gentle handling methods reduce cellular damage during preparation, the potatoes would genuinely taste better. Martha felt a surge of hope. If Princess Melody truly appreciated well-treated vegetables, Edgar's passionate approach to potato preparation could be exactly what they needed to impress her. Edgar, Martha said, tell me more about how you prepare potatoes with respect and understanding. Edgar's face glowed with enthusiasm. Well, first you have to really look at each potato and understand what it wants to become. Some potatoes are meant for mashing. They're softer and more yielding. Others want to be roasted until they're crispy on the outside, but fluffy inside. And some just want to be boiled gently and served simply with butter and herbs. That actually makes sense, Tommy said thoughtfully. Different varieties do have different characteristics. Maybe Edgar is just really good at matching the potato to the right cooking method. Rosalind nodded slowly. From a culinary science perspective, understanding the starch content and cellular structure of different potato varieties is crucial for optimal preparation. Edgar might be describing that process in his own way. Mrs. Thornberry looked relieved. So you think you can satisfy Princess Melody's preferences? I think we can do better than satisfy them, Martha said with growing confidence. I think we can create potato dishes that will genuinely impress her. Edgar, are you willing to take charge of all the potato preparations for the feast? Edgar stood up straighter, clearly honored by the responsibility. The potatoes, and I would be delighted to take care of Princess Melody. We won't let her down. Excellent, Mrs. Thornberry said. Now about the other dishes, remember, keep everything very simple and clean-tasting. No heavy sauces, no complex seasonings. Let the natural flavors shine through. After Mrs. Thornberry left, the kitchen team looked at each other with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The news about Princess Melody's preferences had actually given them more direction, but it also meant they needed to adjust their plans significantly. This could actually work in our favor, Rosalind said thoughtfully. Simple preparations with perfect technique. That's exactly what I've been studying. We can use scientific precision to achieve the cleanest, purest flavors possible. Tommy looked worried. But what about my grandmother's bread? It has lots of complex flavors from the long fermentation. Will that be too much? Martha considered this carefully. Good bread with deep, natural flavors is different from heavy seasoning. If your grandmother's recipe creates pure, weedy flavors without artificial additives, it should be perfect. Edgar was practically bouncing with excitement. This is wonderful. The potatoes have been telling me all along that they want to be the stars of this meal. Now they'll have their chance to shine. As the afternoon progressed, they completely revised their menu plans. Instead of the more elaborate dishes they had originally considered, they focused on perfect simplicity. The beef would be cooked with nothing but salt and fresh herbs. The vegetables would be prepared to showcase their natural flavors. And Edgar's potatoes would take center stage, prepared in several different ways to demonstrate their versatility and quality. I have an idea, Edgar said suddenly. What if we created a potato tasting course? Several small portions of different varieties prepared in different ways, so Princess Melody can experience the full range of what perfect potatoes can offer. Rosalind's eyes lit up. That's brilliant. We could present it like a wine tasting, but with potatoes. Each variety prepared to highlight its unique characteristics. Tommy clapped his hands together. And I could make small bread rolls to accompany each potato variety, different types of bread that complement different potato preparations. Martha felt a surge of pride watching her team work together so creatively. This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need. Not changing traditional methods, but presenting them in new and exciting ways. As the day wound down, they had transformed their menu from a traditional formal dinner into something much more interesting, a celebration of perfect ingredients prepared with skill and understanding. The potato tasting course would be the highlight, but every dish would showcase the same philosophy of respecting ingredients and letting their natural qualities shine. Edgar made one final trip to the potato cellar before leaving for the day. When he returned, his face was glowing with happiness. The potatoes are absolutely thrilled about tomorrow's plan, he announced. They're so excited to meet Princess Melody. They've been practicing their very best flavors all day. Whether or not the potatoes were actually practicing, Edgar's enthusiasm was infectious. Even Rosalind, with all her scientific training, was beginning to see the value in his passionate approach to ingredients. You know what? Rosalind said as they cleaned up their workstations. Maybe there's room for both science and magic in cooking. Edgar's intuitive understanding of his ingredients, combined with precise technique, might create results that neither approach could achieve alone. Tommy nodded eagerly. My grandmother always said that cooking was about putting love into the food. Maybe that's what Edgar does with his potatoes. He puts so much care into them that they really do taste better. Martha looked around at her team with satisfaction. They had started the day with a traditional menu, and some uncertainty about how to proceed. They were ending it with a clear vision and a plan that played to each person's strengths while serving their royal guests exactly what they would most appreciate. "Tomorrow we start the real work," Martha said. "Edgar, first thing in the morning, I want you to show us your potato preparation methods in detail. Rosalind, you'll help us understand the science behind what makes each technique work. And, Tommy, continue with your bread preparations. They're going to be perfect." As they left the kitchen that evening, each team member felt a sense of anticipation. They were no longer just cooking a meal for important guests. They were creating an experience that would showcase the best of what their kitchen could achieve. Edgar paused at the kitchen door and looked back toward the potato cellar. "Good night, friends," he called softly. "Rest well. Tomorrow we start preparing for your big moment." Whether the potatoes heard him or not, the kitchen felt full of possibility and potential. In 4 days, they would discover whether their combination of passion, skill, and scientific precision could create something truly magical for Princess Melody and the other royal guests. The adventure was just beginning, and everyone could feel that something special was about to unfold in the royal kitchens of Willowmere Palace. #The Royal Kitchen Chronicles Wednesday morning brought the first real test of their revised plans. Martha arrived at the kitchen to find Edgar already there, but this time he wasn't alone. Standing next to him was a tall, sturdy man with weathered hands and kind eyes. This was clearly the farmer Edgar had mentioned. "Martha," Edgar called out excitedly, "I'd like you to meet William Hartwell. He's the farmer I told you about, the one who talks to his cattle." William chuckled and extended his hand to Martha. "Edgar here convinced me to bring some samples for you to try. I understand you're cooking for some very important guests." Martha shook his hand, noting the firm grip and honest manner that suggested someone who worked with his hands and took pride in his craft. "Mr. Hartwell, I appreciate you coming, but I should mention that we have established suppliers for the palace." "Of course," William said with understanding. "I'm not here to cause any trouble with your regular arrangements. Edgar just thought you might like to taste what grass-fed, stress-free cattle can produce. If you like it and can arrange something with the palace administration, wonderful. If not, no harm done." Tommy arrived just as William was unpacking a small cooler filled with carefully wrapped cuts of beef. His eyes widened at the deep red color and beautiful marbling of the meat. "I've never seen beef that looks quite like that," Tommy said in amazement. "It's so vibrant." William smiled proudly. "That's what happens when cattle live good lives eating natural grass and enjoying plenty of space. The meat develops better color, flavor, and texture. Would you like to try a small sample?" Before Martha could answer, Rosalind burst through the kitchen doors carrying an armload of books and looking slightly frazzled. "Sorry I'm late. I was up all night reading about historical royal banquet traditions, and I think I found something important." She stopped short when she saw the stranger in the kitchen. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize we had a visitor." Edgar made introductions while Rosalind set down her books and caught her breath. "William, this is our resident food scientist, Rosalind Chun." "Rosalind, William raises the happiest cattle in the county." Rosalind looked intrigued rather than skeptical this time. "Happy cattle? From a nutritional science perspective, that actually makes sense. Stress hormones can significantly affect meat quality. Animals that experience less stress produce more tender meat with better flavor compounds." William nodded approvingly. "Exactly right, miss. My cattle spend their days grazing in open pastures, never crowded or rushed. They're handled gently and treated with respect. I believe they can sense when they're cared for, just like Edgar's potatoes do." Martha felt torn between curiosity about the beef and concern about disrupting established palace procedures. "Mr. Hartwell, your approach sounds wonderful, but changing suppliers this close to such an important event, what if we just tried a small piece?" Tommy suggested eagerly. "We could cook it simply and see how it compares to our regular beef. If it's not better, we stick with the original plan." Edgar nodded enthusiastically. The potatoes have been asking about their meal companions all morning. They're very excited to meet beef that's been raised with the same care they've received. Rosalind pulled out her notebook. From a scientific perspective, a control comparison would give us valuable data. We could prepare identical samples using both sources and evaluate them objectively. Martha looked around at her eager team and realized that their enthusiasm for excellence was exactly what she wanted to encourage. All right, let's do a proper test. But if we decide to use Mr. Hartwell's beef, we'll need to clear it with Mrs. Thornberry and the palace administration. William beamed. Fair enough. I brought just enough for a proper test. How would you like to prepare it? Rosalind consulted her temperature charts. We should use the low-temperature method I researched. It will give us the most accurate comparison of the meat's natural quality without interference from cooking variables. While Rosalind set up her precision cooking equipment, Edgar went to select potatoes that would complement the beef tasting. Tommy began preparing a simple herb mixture that would enhance rather than mask the meat's natural flavors. Now, while that's cooking, Rosalind said, let me tell you what I discovered about royal banquet traditions. I found records from banquets held centuries ago in palaces very similar to this one. She opened one of her books to a page marked with several bookmarks. Historically, the most successful royal banquets weren't necessarily the most elaborate ones. The feasts that were remembered and talked about for generations were those that perfectly showcased local ingredients prepared with exceptional skill. Martha leaned in to look at the old illustrations and recipes. What do you mean? Look at this menu from a famous banquet in 1847. Rosalind pointed to a faded page. Very simple dishes, roasted meat, perfect vegetables, fresh bread, local cheese. But the records show that guests talked about it for years because every single element was prepared to absolute perfection. Tommy peered over Rosalind's shoulder. So it wasn't about being fancy, it was about being excellent. Exactly. The key was using ingredients at their absolute peak and preparing them with complete mastery of traditional techniques. Sound familiar? Edgar clapped his hands together. That's exactly what the potatoes have been trying to tell me. They don't want to be turned into something strange and modern. They want to be the best possible version of themselves. William nodded approvingly from where he was monitoring the beef cooking. That philosophy applies to cattle raising too. I don't try to make my animals into something they're not. I just give them the best possible life so they can become the best version of what they naturally are. The kitchen filled with an incredible aroma as the beef began to cook. Even Martha, with her decades of experience, had to admit she'd never smelled anything quite like it. The meat seemed to be releasing deeper, richer scents than usual. The temperature is holding perfectly at 131 degrees, Rosalind reported, consulting her digital thermometer. At this rate, we should have perfect medium rare throughout in about 45 minutes. While they waited, Edgar showed everyone his potato selection for the tasting. He had chosen 5 different varieties, each one perfect for a different preparation method. These Yukon Golds will be mashed with just cream and butter, Edgar explained, holding up a smooth, golden potato. The King Edwards will be roasted until crispy. These fingerlings will be boiled gently and served with herbs. The Purple Majesties will be steamed to preserve their beautiful color. And these tiny new potatoes will be dressed simply with olive oil and sea salt. Tommy examined each potato carefully. They really are beautiful. I can see why you enjoy working with them so much. Each variety has its own personality, Edgar said seriously. The Yukon Golds are generous and creamy. The King Edwards are sturdy and reliable. The fingerlings are delicate and elegant. You have to understand what each one offers and treat it accordingly. Rosalind looked up from her temperature monitoring. You know, Edgar, what you're describing is essentially variety-specific optimization based on starch content, moisture levels, and cellular structure. You're just expressing it in more poetic terms. Edgar smiled. Maybe poetry and science aren't so different when it comes to understanding good food. When the beef was ready, they gathered around to taste both William's sample and a piece from their regular supplier, cooked identically. The difference was immediately apparent. William's beef was more tender, with a deeper, cleaner flavor that seemed to capture the essence of what beef should taste like. Oh my! Martha said quietly after her first bite. "This is extraordinary." Tommy's eyes widened as he chewed thoughtfully. "It tastes like the idea of beef, if that makes sense. Like what beef dreams of being." Rosalind, ever the scientist, took careful notes as she tasted. "The texture is noticeably more tender, and the flavor is more concentrated without being heavier. The stress-free environment really does make a measurable difference." William looked pleased, but not surprised. When you treat animals with respect and give them good lives, they reward you with better meat. It's not magic. It's just the natural result of care and attention. Edgar nodded knowingly. Just like the potatoes, when you treat ingredients well, they become better versions of themselves. Martha looked around at her team, all of them clearly excited by the possibility of using such exceptional beef for their royal feast. "Mr. Hartwell, if we wanted to purchase enough of this beef for our banquet, what would be involved?" "Well," William said thoughtfully, "I need to contact Mrs. Thornberry about the paperwork and approvals. But I happen to have enough properly aged beef available right now. I was hoping you might be interested, so I held back some of my best cuts." As if summoned by the mention of her name, Mrs. Thornberry arrived at the kitchen. She paused when she saw the stranger and raised an eyebrow at Martha. "Mrs. Thornberry," Martha said quickly, "this is William Hartwell, a local cattle farmer. We've been testing his beef for possible use in Saturday's feast." Mrs. Thornberry's expression was carefully neutral. "I see. And why are we considering a change in suppliers at this late date?" Before Martha could answer, Edgar jumped in enthusiastically. "Because his beef is absolutely perfect. It's been raised with the same care and respect that we put into our cooking. The potatoes specifically requested to be paired with beef this good." Mrs. Thornberry looked skeptical about Edgar's potato communications, but Tommy stepped forward with a piece of the cooked beef on a fork. "Mrs. Thornberry, you really should taste this. I've never experienced beef quite like it." Somewhat reluctantly, Mrs. Thornberry accepted the offered taste. Her expression changed immediately, eyebrows rising in surprise. This is quite exceptional," she admitted. "Mr. Hartwell, what would be required to source enough of this quality for Saturday's feast?" William smiled modestly. "I can provide everything you need, and all my cattle are raised according to the highest standards. I can have the proper paperwork and certifications to you within an hour." Rosalind pulled out her notebook. "From a menu planning perspective, beef this good would actually simplify our preparations. We wouldn't need complex seasonings or elaborate cooking methods. Simple preparation would showcase the meat's natural excellence." Mrs. Thornberry considered this carefully. "If the paperwork checks out and the cost is reasonable, I suppose we could make an exception. The quality is undeniably superior." Edgar clapped his hands together. The potatoes are going to be so excited. They've been practicing their flavor harmonies all morning in preparation for meeting their perfect partners. After William left to retrieve his documentation and Mrs. Thornberry departed to handle the administrative details, the kitchen team looked at each other with growing excitement. "I can't believe we're actually going to use that amazing beef," Tommy said, grinning widely. "This feast is going to be incredible." Rosalind was already adjusting her cooking charts. "With beef that good, we can focus on perfect temperature control and simple seasonings. The meat will speak for itself." Martha felt a surge of confidence that she hadn't experienced since they started planning the feast. They were moving away from trying to impress with complexity and toward showcasing absolute excellence in simplicity. Right then, Martha said, taking charge, "We have 2 days to finalize every detail of our preparations. Edgar, I want you to continue working with your potatoes. Keep them happy and ready for their starring role. Rosalind, adjust all our cooking specifications for the new beef. Tommy, how is your special bread coming along?" Tommy's face lit up. "It's developing beautifully. The flavors are getting deeper and more complex every day. I think it's going to be perfect." Edgar made another trip to the potato cellar and returned with an announcement. The potatoes are absolutely thrilled about the beef. They've been composing welcome songs all morning. They want to make sure they're worthy companions for such exceptional meat. Rosalind shook her head in amazement. I'm starting to think Edgar's communication with his vegetables might be more real than I initially believed. Whether it's actual conversation or just incredible intuition, his results speak for themselves. As the afternoon progressed, they refined every aspect of their menu. The potato tasting course would feature Edgar's 5 varieties, each prepared to absolute perfection. The main course would be William's exceptional beef, cooked using Rosalind's precise low-temperature method, and seasoned with just salt and fresh herbs from the palace garden. Tommy's grandmother's bread would accompany everything, providing complex, weedy flavors that had developed through days of careful fermentation. Simple vegetables from the palace garden would add color and freshness, prepared with the same philosophy of respecting natural flavors. This menu tells a story, Martha realized as she looked over their final plans. It's the story of ingredients that have been cared for and respected, prepared by people who understand and appreciate their natural qualities. Edgar nodded enthusiastically. That's exactly what the potatoes wanted all along, to be part of a meal that celebrates natural excellence rather than artificial complexity. As evening approached, the team felt ready for the final push towards Saturday's feast. They had exceptional ingredients, a clear philosophy, and growing confidence in their approach. Tomorrow we do our final preparations, Martha announced. Friday we rest and double-check everything. Saturday we create a feast that Princess Melody and her father will remember for the rest of their lives. Tommy looked around the kitchen with satisfaction. I think we're going to succeed. This feels different from just cooking a meal. It feels like we're creating something special. Rosalind packed up her charts and notebooks. The science supports everything we're doing. We have optimal ingredients prepared with perfect technique. The results should be extraordinary. Edgar made one final check on his potatoes before leaving for the day. They're ready, he announced with complete confidence. They've been practicing all day, and they know exactly what they want to become for Princess Melody. As Martha locked up the kitchen, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. They had transformed what started as a traditional formal dinner into something much more meaningful, a celebration of excellence in simplicity, a showcase of ingredients treated with respect and skill. Tomorrow would bring the final preparations, and Saturday would reveal whether their philosophy of natural excellence could create a truly memorable royal feast. But tonight, Martha felt confident that they were on the right path. The potatoes might or might not actually be singing, but the entire kitchen team was definitely humming with anticipation for what promised to be an extraordinary culinary adventure. Hashtag The Royal Kitchen Chronicles Thursday morning arrived with brilliant sunshine streaming through the kitchen windows, as if the weather itself was celebrating the approaching royal feast. Martha arrived to find her entire team already assembled, along with several additional kitchen staff who had volunteered to help with the intensive preparation day. Edgar was practically glowing with excitement, his notebook filled with what he claimed were the potatoes' final requests for their preparation. Tommy was checking on his grandmother's bread, which had reached perfect maturity after 3 days of careful fermentation. Rosalind had arrived early to set up all her precision cooking equipment and verify that every temperature would be exactly right. Today's the big preparation day, Martha announced to the assembled group. Tomorrow we rest and do final checks. Saturday we serve the most important meal this kitchen has ever prepared. Is everyone ready? A chorus of enthusiastic yes filled the kitchen. Even the additional staff members seemed caught up in the excitement of the project. William Hartwell arrived promptly at 8 o'clock with the beef, all properly aged and ready for preparation. The meat was even more beautiful than the sample they had tasted, deep red with perfect marbling that promised exceptional flavor and tenderness. This is the finest beef I've ever produced, William said as he carefully unpacked each cut. The cattle seemed to sense that they were contributing to something special. I've never seen them so calm and content during processing. Edgar nodded knowingly. The potatoes told me the beef would be exceptional. They've been preparing to complement these flavors perfectly. Mrs. Thornberry arrived to oversee the preparations, and ensure that everything met the exacting standards required for royal guests. She examined William's beef with approval and then turned to inspect Edgar's potato selection. "Mr. Pumpernickel," she said formally, "these vegetables are absolutely beautiful. I've never seen potatoes with such perfect skin and uniform size. How did you achieve such quality?" Edgar beamed with pride. "It's all about communication, Mrs. Thornberry. When you talk to vegetables and really listen to what they need, they respond by becoming the best versions of themselves." Mrs. Thornberry looked skeptical, but couldn't argue with the results. "Well, whatever your methods, they certainly work. These are the finest potatoes I've seen in my 30 years of palace event planning." Rosalind had set up her cooking station with scientific precision. Digital thermometers were positioned throughout the preparation area, timers were synchronized, and every piece of equipment had been calibrated to ensure perfect results. "The beef needs to start its initial preparation in exactly 2 hours," Rosalind announced, consulting her detailed schedule. "That will allow sufficient time for the protein structures to relax while maintaining optimal texture for tomorrow's final cooking." Tommy was carefully shaping his grandmother's bread into the final forms it would take for baking. The dough had developed a complex, yeasty aroma that filled the kitchen with the promise of extraordinary flavor. "This bread is going to be perfect," Tommy said with quiet confidence. "It smells exactly like my grandmother's kitchen used to smell when she was preparing for special occasions." As the morning progressed, the kitchen became a symphony of coordinated activity. Edgar began the preliminary preparation of his potatoes, washing each one individually and speaking softly to them as he worked. Whether or not the vegetables could actually hear him, his gentle handling ensured that none of them were damaged or bruised. "The Yukon Golds are especially excited today," Edgar reported as he worked. "They know they're going to be transformed into something creamy and wonderful for Princess Melody." Rosalind was measuring and recording the exact temperature of the beef as it slowly came to room temperature. "Optimal meat temperature for even cooking is crucial," she explained to the observing staff. "If we start cooking while the meat is too cold, the outside will overcook before the center reaches the right temperature." Tommy began the final proofing of his bread, carefully monitoring the dough's development. His grandmother had taught him to recognize the exact moment when bread was ready for baking, not by time or appearance, but by the way it felt when gently poked. Mrs. Thornberry moved through the kitchen like a general inspecting troops before battle, checking each preparation and ensuring that everyone understood their role in tomorrow's service. "The King of Brightdale and Princess Melody arrive tomorrow morning," she reminded everyone. "The official reception is at 2 o'clock, followed by a tour of the palace gardens. The feast begins at 7 o'clock sharp. Every element must be perfect and precisely timed." Around midday, they received an unexpected visitor. A young woman in elegant traveling clothes was escorted into the kitchen by a palace guard. She had kind eyes and an air of gentle authority that immediately commanded attention. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion," the young woman said politely. "I'm Princess Melody's personal assistant, Sarah. I arrived early to ensure that everything will be suitable for Her Royal Highness's dietary needs." Mrs. Thornberry immediately went into formal mode. "Of course, Miss Sarah. We've adjusted our menu according to the information you provided. Perhaps you'd like to review our preparations?" Sarah smiled warmly. "Actually, I was hoping to speak with whoever is responsible for the potato preparations. Princess Melody has particular sensitivities regarding how vegetables are treated during cooking." Edgar stepped forward, his face bright with excitement. "That would be me. I'm Edgar Pumpernickel, potato specialist. I've been working with vegetables for 40 years, and I understand exactly what Princess Melody needs." Sarah looked surprised by Edgar's enthusiasm, but pleased by his obvious dedication. "Princess Melody believes that vegetables can sense whether they've been treated with respect and care. She says she can taste the difference in the final dish." "Exactly," Edgar exclaimed. "That's what I've been trying to tell everyone. The potatoes know when they're being appreciated, and they respond by offering their best flavors." "Would you like to meet them?" Sarah looked intrigued. "Meet them? The potatoes I've selected for Princess Melody. They're particularly excited about tomorrow's feast. I think you'll be able to sense their happiness. Sarah followed Edgar to his preparation station, where the selected potatoes were arranged by variety. Edgar picked up one of the Yukon Golds and handed it to Sarah. Feel the smooth skin, the perfect firmness. This potato has been cared for from the moment it was planted. It knows it's going to become something wonderful for someone who will truly appreciate its natural qualities. Sarah held the potato carefully, turning it over in her hands. It does feel special, somehow, very peaceful and content. Edgar nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. Happy vegetables make better food. Princess Melody will be able to taste the care that went into growing and preparing every potato. Rosalind watched this interaction with fascination. Despite her scientific training, she was beginning to see the value in Edgar's intuitive approach to ingredients. There's actually scientific support for what Edgar is describing, Rosalind said to Sarah. Vegetables that are handled gently suffer less cellular damage, which preserves their natural flavors and textures. Edgar's respectful approach genuinely creates better-tasting food. Sarah smiled with relief. Princess Melody will be so pleased. She's often disappointed by formal meals because she can sense when vegetables have been treated as mere commodities rather than appreciated for their natural qualities. Tommy had been listening to this conversation while monitoring his bread. If Princess Melody appreciates ingredients that have been cared for, she's going to love this bread. Every step of the process has been done with attention and respect for the grain. Sarah turned to examine the rising loaves. These do look exceptional. May I ask about your methods? Tommy explained his grandmother's traditional approach, the long fermentation that allowed natural flavors to develop, the careful attention to the dough's needs at each stage, and the patience required to let time and natural processes create complexity. My grandmother always said that good bread couldn't be rushed, Tommy explained. You have to work with the natural timing of fermentation and respect what the grain wants to become. Sarah nodded approvingly. Princess Melody will appreciate that philosophy. She believes that the best food comes from working with natural processes rather than forcing artificial results. As the afternoon continued, Sarah observed each aspect of their preparations. She watched William's beef being prepared with Rosalind's scientific precision. She examined the herbs Tommy had selected from the palace garden, and she spent considerable time talking with Edgar about his relationship with vegetables. I've never seen a kitchen staff with such dedication to their ingredients, Sarah told Mrs. Thornberry as the preparations neared completion. Princess Melody is going to be absolutely delighted by tomorrow's feast. Mrs. Thornberry looked relieved and proud. We've certainly assembled an exceptional team for this meal. Everyone has contributed their unique expertise. As evening approached, the major preparations were complete. William's beef had been perfectly prepared for tomorrow's final cooking. Edgar's potatoes were ready for their various transformations. Tommy's bread was proofed and ready for baking. The herbs were selected and prepared, and Rosalind had created detailed timing charts for every aspect of tomorrow's service. The potatoes are practically vibrating with excitement, Edgar reported after a final check on his vegetables. They can hardly wait to meet Princess Melody tomorrow. Sarah laughed delightedly. I think Princess Melody is equally excited to meet them. She's never encountered a potato specialist who speaks their language so fluently. As the team prepared to leave for the day, Martha looked around the kitchen with deep satisfaction. Tomorrow would be the culmination of their week of preparation, but tonight she felt confident that they had created something truly special. Everyone should get a good night's rest, Martha announced. Tomorrow we'll arrive early for final preparations, but the hard work is done. We've created a menu that showcases the absolute best our kitchen can offer. Tommy packed away his bread with careful attention. I can't wait to see Princess Melody's reaction when she tastes everything we've prepared. This feels like the most important meal I've ever been part of. Rosalind gathered her scientific equipment and charts. From a technical perspective, we've optimized every variable for maximum quality. The results should be exceptional by any measurable standard. Edgar made one final visit to his potatoes, speaking softly to them about tomorrow's big moment. Rest well tonight, friends. Tomorrow you'll show Princess Melody what vegetables can achieve when they're truly appreciated. Sarah prepared to leave with promises to return early tomorrow to help with any final details. Princess Melody is going to be amazed by your dedication and skill. This feast will be remembered for years to come. As Martha locked up the kitchen for the night, she felt a deep sense of anticipation mixed with confidence. They had spent a week transforming their approach from traditional complexity to exceptional simplicity, and tomorrow would reveal whether their philosophy of respecting natural excellence could create a truly memorable royal feast. The ingredients were ready, the techniques were perfected, and the team was united in their commitment to excellence. Tomorrow, Princess Melody would discover whether vegetables really could communicate their happiness through flavor, and whether a kitchen staff dedicated to natural excellence could create something magical. The stage was set for what promised to be the most important and successful meal in the history of Willowmere Palace's royal kitchen. Hashtag the Royal Kitchen Chronicles. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, with golden sunlight flooding the royal kitchen windows like nature's blessing on the most important day in the kitchen's history. Martha arrived before sunrise to find Edgar already there, sitting peacefully beside his potato preparation station with a cup of tea and his notebook filled with what he claimed were the vegetables' final pre-feast messages. "Good morning, Martha," Edgar said with serene confidence. "The potatoes slept well, and they're ready for their starring role. They've been practicing their flavor harmonies all night." Martha smiled, no longer questioning Edgar's unique relationship with his vegetables. Whether real or imagined, his passionate dedication had produced the most beautiful potatoes she'd ever seen. "Are you nervous, Edgar?" "Not at all," Edgar replied with surprising calm. "The potatoes, and I know we're ready. We've prepared with love and respect, and Princess Melody will taste that in every bite." Tommy arrived next, his usually wild red hair carefully combed for the special occasion. He headed straight to his bread, which was ready for its final baking. The aroma that filled the kitchen when he opened the proofing boxes was absolutely heavenly, complex, yeasty, and deeply satisfying. "This is it," Tommy said softly, his young face serious with concentration. 3 days of fermentation have created something my grandmother would be proud of." Rosalind entered carrying her equipment case and wearing her most professional chef jacket. Her scientific precision would ensure that every temperature and timing was perfect throughout the day's service. She had spent the morning double-checking all her calculations and preparing backup plans for any possible complications. "Good morning, everyone," Rosalind said, her usual nervous energy replaced by focused determination. "Today we prove that scientific precision combined with passionate ingredient care can create something truly magical." William Hartwell arrived with a small cart carrying ice to keep the beef at optimal temperature until the moment it began cooking. His weathered face showed quiet pride as he surveyed the kitchen where his cattle's contribution would soon be transformed into something extraordinary. "My beef has never been in better hands," William said to Martha. "These cattle lived good lives, and today they'll become part of something that will bring joy to very important people." Mrs. Thornberry appeared promptly at 7 o'clock, clipboard in hand, and wearing her most formal palace uniform. Her usually stern expression was softened by obvious excitement about the day's potential success. "The King of Brightdale and Princess Melody arrived safely last night," she announced. "Their preliminary tour of the palace has been completed, and initial reports suggest they're very impressed with Willowmere's hospitality. The final test will be this evening's feast." Sarah, Princess Melody's assistant, arrived shortly after Mrs. Thornberry. She had spent the previous evening briefing the princess about the special care that had gone into preparing the meal, and she reported that Melody was eagerly anticipating the experience. Princess Melody spent 20 minutes last night talking about her conversation with Edgar and the happy potatoes, Sarah said with a smile. She's never been more excited about a formal dinner. Edgar beamed with delight. The potatoes are equally excited about meeting her. They've been preparing special flavors just for someone who truly appreciates vegetables. As the morning progressed, the kitchen became a model of organized efficiency. Tommy's bread went into the ovens, filling the air with aromas that made everyone pause in appreciation. Edgar began the careful preparation of his potatoes, handling each variety with the reverence of an artist working with precious materials. Rosalind set up her precision cooking station for the beef, monitoring temperatures and timing with scientific accuracy. Every detail had been calculated to achieve perfect results, but she had also learned to appreciate the intuitive approaches that Edgar and Tommy brought to their work. "The beautiful thing about today," Rosalind said as she checked her equipment, "is that we're combining the best of traditional methods with modern understanding, science, and intuition working together." By midday, the preliminary preparations were complete. Tommy's bread had emerged from the ovens golden and perfect, with a crust that sang when tapped and an interior that promised complex flavors developed through patient fermentation. Edgar's potatoes were prepared and waiting for their final cooking stages. William's beef was ready for the precise low-temperature cooking that would begin in exactly 3 hours. "Everything is proceeding perfectly," Mrs. Thornberry announced after her inspection tour. "The dining hall is prepared, the royal guests are enjoying their afternoon rest, and the kitchen is ready to create culinary history." The afternoon brought a different energy to the kitchen. The frantic preparation was over, replaced by focused concentration as each team member prepared for their role in the evening service. Additional serving staff arrived to learn about each dish and understand the story behind the meal they would present. Edgar spent considerable time explaining his potato preparations to the serving staff. "Each variety tells a different story," he said seriously. "The Yukon Golds speak of creamy comfort, the King Edwards celebrate crispy perfection, and the fingerlings whisper of delicate elegance. When you serve them, remember that you're presenting vegetables that have been loved and respected." Tommy demonstrated his bread cutting technique, showing the servers how to slice the loaves to reveal the beautiful crumb structure created by 3 days of careful fermentation. "Each slice should show the complex interior," he explained. "This bread has worked hard to develop these flavors." Rosalind briefed the servers on the beef preparation, explaining how the low-temperature cooking method would deliver unprecedented tenderness and flavor. "This meat has been treated with respect from farm to plate," she said. "Every bite will demonstrate what beef can become when everything is done right." As 5 o'clock approached, the final cooking began. Edgar started his potatoes, each variety receiving exactly the treatment it deserved to reach its full potential. The Yukon Golds went into gentle boiling water that would transform them into silk-smooth mash. The King Edwards went into the hot ovens where they would develop crispy skins and fluffy interiors. The fingerlings received gentle steaming that would preserve their delicate character. Tommy heated his ovens for the final warming of his bread, timing it so the loaves would be at peak warmth when served. The aroma that filled the kitchen was so compelling that palace staff found excuses to walk past the kitchen doors just to breathe it in. Rosalind began the final cooking of William's beef, monitoring temperatures with absolute precision as the meat slowly reached perfect doneness throughout. The low-temperature method would take longer than traditional roasting, but the results would be worth the extra time and attention. "Beef temperature is rising perfectly," Rosalind announced. "We're achieving even cooking throughout while maintaining optimal moisture and tenderness." At 6 o'clock, Mrs. Thornberry arrived for the final inspection. The kitchen had transformed into a stage set for culinary excellence. Every surface was clean and organized, every dish was progressing perfectly, and the entire team radiated confidence and excitement. "I've never seen a kitchen more ready for an important service," Mrs. Thornberry said with obvious satisfaction. "Whatever the outcome tonight, you should all be proud of your preparation and dedication." Edgar made one final check on his potatoes and announced that they were ready to meet their destiny. "They're absolutely perfect," he said with quiet pride. "Each variety has achieved exactly what it wanted to become." Tommy checked his bread and nodded with satisfaction. 3 days of patience have created something special. This bread is ready to complement everything else perfectly. Rosalind verified her beef temperatures one final time. Optimal doneness achieved throughout. This meat is as perfect as science and care can make it. At exactly 7 o'clock, the first course began its journey to the royal dining hall. The servers, carefully briefed on the story behind each dish, presented the meal not just as food but as a celebration of excellence achieved through respect for natural ingredients. The kitchen staff gathered around the service window to catch glimpses of the royal guests' reactions. Princess Melody's face lit up with delight when the potato tasting course was presented, 5 small portions that showcased Edgar's different varieties prepared to perfection. "Look at her expression," Tommy whispered excitedly. "She knows these vegetables are special." Through the service window, they could see Princess Melody tasting each potato preparation with obvious appreciation. She spoke animatedly with her father, the King of Brightdale, pointing to different preparations and clearly explaining something about the care that had gone into each one. When the main course arrived, featuring William's beef cooked with Rosalind's scientific precision and Tommy's exceptional bread, the royal guest appreciation was obvious even from the kitchen. Princess Melody cut into her beef with ceremony, tasted it thoughtfully, and then smiled with such genuine pleasure that the entire kitchen staff cheered quietly. "She understands," Edgar said with deep satisfaction. "She can taste that everything was prepared with love and respect." The meal continued with each course receiving similar appreciation from the royal guests. The King of Brightdale complimented Mrs. Thornberry on the exceptional quality of the food, and Princess Melody specifically requested to meet the kitchen staff responsible for the potato preparations. As the evening concluded, Mrs. Thornberry returned to the kitchen with news that brought tears of joy to everyone's eyes. "Princess Melody says this is the finest meal she has ever been served," Mrs. Thornberry announced. She particularly wants to thank Edgar for understanding that vegetables have souls that can be honored through careful preparation. "The king has asked for copies of all your recipes to share with their palace kitchens." Edgar wiped tears from his eyes. The potatoes knew this would happen. They've been preparing for months to meet someone who would truly appreciate their gifts. Tommy couldn't contain his excitement. "My grandmother would be so proud. Her bread recipe will be served in another royal palace." Rosalind felt a deep satisfaction that went beyond professional achievement. "We proved that combining scientific precision with passionate ingredient care creates results that transcend either approach alone." Martha looked around at her extraordinary team. Edgar with his mystical connection to vegetables, Tommy with his enthusiastic dedication to traditional methods, Rosalind with her scientific precision, and William with his commitment to raising happy animals. Together, they had created something that none of them could have achieved individually. "You should all be proud," Martha said, her voice thick with emotion. "Tonight we didn't just serve a meal. We created an experience that honored every ingredient and celebrated the best of what our kitchen can achieve." As they cleaned up after the most successful service in the palace's history, Edgar made one final visit to the potato cellar. The remaining vegetables seemed to glow with satisfaction, as if they understood that their companions had achieved something magnificent. "Thank you, friends," Edgar whispered to the potatoes. "You showed Princess Melody what vegetables can become when they're trained."